Here we are at the start of another E46 M3 rear axle carrier panel repair and reinforcement process at Redish Motorsport in the UK. This model is a E46 M3 convertible, 2006 model. It's a very late one of the last ones. SMG transmission, and it's got, I believe, about 59,000 miles on it. So it's very low mileage, definitely less than 60 from memory. And it's come to us because it needed a health check and just a few things before it goes on a road trip. And one of the things we noticed, as we do with checking when we carry out these comprehensive vehicle inspections, is that it is suffering from a crack in the rear axle carrier panel, which is very unfortunate because the customer specifically bought it on the grounds that it didn't have a crack, and it was very good, and it's been checked by two specialists since then, and they've given it the all clear. And that was, I think, within the last year or so. But unfortunately, they hadn't cleaned the rear axle carrier panel like we do, and like you should, because all the undersides of the cars always suffer with grime and build up of dirt, road dirt, whereas that's what the car looks like underneath if you clean all that off. And when you do clean it off, you can then quite clearly see a hairline crack. And those aren't terrible, they're only hairline cracks, but it is quite long, because that there is nearly 50 millimeters long going that way, which is horizontal, and then when we go around the 90-degree corner and go up the vertical slope, the crack is also travelling and goes very high. We yet haven't got to the top of it because we can't reach that far without taking the axle down, but as you can see, that's a considerable crack. And interestingly, I think this is the first vehicle that we've seen with a crack in the left rear mounting point of a car that's after October 2004, which has the new style panel. And what I mean by the new style rear axle carrier panel is that there's a big plastic block in this area now, strengthening that cavity, which was hollow, and making it solid by bonding. It looks like a 3D printed plastic block, and it's bonded very well to all four sides of that cavity to stiffen it up. And traditionally, up until this point, all those vehicles that we've seen are always okay in this corner. They're not suffering with hairline cracks. So for a long time we've been saying that those later cars are okay and much less likely to suffer, which has been true from our evidence. But now that throws everything out of the window, because this is a 2006 model. It does have the later panel with the plastic block inside there, and it's only done 59,000 miles, less than the BMW's 60,000 warranty mileage in the UK. And it is suffering with a big crack up in that location there. Interestingly, not too many cracks or spot weld issues up on the left hand side. There's one evidence up here of a slight spot weld dented area, which might be breaking, but normally with a crack that large we'd also see several spot welds down here, and possibly even a little crack going up this sector here. But that's normally because on these later panels they were also held to the left wheel arch panel better, with an extra factory spot weld, MIG weld just here, as long as that one as with that one up there, and then they also got an extra 2 spot welds down this area. So this area, that's why that's probably not moving as much. And normally you would be able to see a crack in the seam sealer down here, but there might be a little evidence just up there, but so far it's looking quite good. But we can't exactly tell you why it's cracked that badly on the left rear mounting point, but it's definitely advisable to get this looked at now before it travels and grows anymore. Even though it's not opened up and it's not necessarily structurally deforming the panel, I think it would be sensible, and the customer is wanting us to investigate further. So we're going to be taking the axle out, stripping this car down as our usual process, also doing some bore scope camera activity inside the car to find out if there's any panel spot weld damage or crack damage in the back cavities, and then also in the front pair of cavity mounts for the tops of these front pair of bushes, but those ones are only accessed through the seat panel. And because it's a convertible model, it's even harder, because we've got a convertible bulkhead in the way, which we need to cut out the way first. So this is going to be the start of the video showing how we repair this car. The underside of this E46 M3 convertible is stripped now. Still need to take the shocks off and the brake pipes and the fuel vent pipe, things like that, but we're pretty much stripped. So this is what it looks like, with the under trays, the axle, fuel tank, exhaust, prop shaft, all those sort of things disconnected. The last thing in the car that remains bulky is the gearbox. Everything else backwards is disconnected. So now we've still got obviously dirt and debris from the road grime that we need to remove so that we can have a good look. But we get to see the cracks for the first time. So this is the one that we talked about in the video earlier that we could see, which is going along the horizontal plane. And then the vertical plane, where it goes around the corner, is a decent length actually, quite a surprise. It's the largest one we've done on a 2006. Haven't yet cleaned enough off to see whether it's reached that spot weld up there or whether it's going to go past it or even not make it up to it. But definitely hairline crack there, quite large in length, and that needs to be addressed. And then that one spot weld that looks likely to be broken up there. Then we've also got left front mounting point, got a decent crack coming out from that side there, going around the mounting point and coming down there, it looks like. Also a broken spot weld, or a spot weld that's definitely flexed in that location there. That's a rare thing to see, a spot weld there and possibly a crack there. Also a spot weld there looks like it could have corrosion, which may be a crack coming out of it. That's definitely rare. So that's probably reacting, this panel's reacting in a slightly different way because it's the later model, which has got a big plastic brace in here, and yet still it's cracked badly there. And the reaction possibly of the energy, the torsional loading going through the panel is giving us a different set of cracks, which is quite interesting. Slightly worrying, but quite interesting. They can still be addressed and contained with the Redish V2 reinforcement plate kit and our extensive knowledge of the rear axle carrier panel. So when we go inside the car and if we find cracks up in the MIG welds inside this cavity under the rear seat, we can deal with them and improve them. Then moving on to the right front, we've got a spot weld broken as well, which is shown by that corrosion there, where the bush has been impacting on the spot weld, and a crack coming out of that spot weld, which is in front of my thumb just here. Probably going to be a crack going through there. Yeah, I can see what looks like to be a crack. Yeah, definitely a crack going directly in the middle of that black bush imprint. Now this is also interesting as well. The bush imprint is very strong. You don't normally see so much of a bush imprint on that, so that's possibly why that spot weld is cracked a little bit prematurely, being it's only 59,000 miles, because we know, everybody knows that the torsional load and the movement of the subframe and how the energy enters the chassis is pivoting and tipping the studs that are in here, which is what helped break the spot welds by flexing the two panels apart. But also the bush impact into it has a very slight bearing on it as well, which may be why we've got crack coming out of there already at a low mileage late vehicle. And then moving on to the right rear mount, we've got a small hairline crack starting just here on the fold, which is almost a mirrored image of the fold of this side. A small crack there, not too bad, 15 millimeters, 22 millimeters, I suppose, worst case. Still need to degrease to find out what spot welds, if we've got any spot weld issues. We've got flex on a spot weld, that doesn't necessarily mean it's broken, but we can have breakages in those areas there. Then just little bits of corrosion really, where the fuel tank's been rubbing here and here. Chassis, apart from that, looks okay. It's got a fair amount of road grime on it, which is sometimes a little bit more helpful, especially some of the oily products like here and over that mount there and over the prop shaft tunnel area. That can actually help stop corrosion building up. Now, normally you'd see corrosion on the edge of panels where they haven't got any seam sealer, but look at these, they're all good and original. So I'm quite hopeful once we've degreased this car that the car structural wise should be very good, apart from the hairline cracks it's suffering with, but that's no problem for us. We can deal with those, and that's what we're going to do next, degrease. The degreasing stage now finished on this E46 M3 convertible. Still need to take the shock absorbers out, but we're very happy with the degrease process. Completely different to the underside. Got just a general road grime and years worth of dirt off of this. And now we can see properly the cracks and problems that we've got to deal with. So here's this crack coming out of the spot weld, broken spot weld with several cracks, at least 4 I can see straight away. Another flex spot weld there. That is a crack going around that mounting point, because that dark line there is a bit of a crack. You can just see the crack going that way, heading over to the spot weld, and another part of the crack coming down that way. So we need to take that out. Also cracked around that mounting point there, plus the spot weld broken with cracks going that way. A little bit of flex on that one, I suppose. Then we've got the decent crack on this left rear mounting point, which is quite a long one, which just falls short, I think, of the spot weld up there at the moment. We need to investigate that. Also looks to be spot weld broken here with 2 cracks coming out of it. broken spot weld there because that won't clean out, so we know that there's dirt inside the spot weld. There's what the good spot weld should look like, those ones there. Early signs of spot weld movement on that one there, again because the dirt is trapped in the metal, not just in the divot of the spot weld. Small crack on that side that we knew about there. At the moment everything else looks okay in this area, so then we're just looking at the outside wheel arch, which doesn't appear to have shown any splits in the seam sealer down this side, but that's because these later models have got the extra MIG weld just there, which is starting to break corrosion. There's always one there, but then the late cars have one there as well. Then they have 2 extra spot welds. I think it's that one there and that one there, which is good, sort of holds that up, but obviously it still shows the energy travels throughout the car and moves other, or cracks other points there. So now we can start moving on to the spot weld drilling out, and then also stop drilling the ends of the hairline cracks before we start doing any welding. And interestingly, we've also got a decent amount of seam sealer split here, which is quite interesting. That some cars do suffer with that, and that's just because there's a spot weld there and there, but the bolt point is further past the spot weld point, and the flex on that rear trailing arm pocket joint just makes the panel move very slightly. And we've never actually seen one break away, but the sealer split in there tells you that there's a good amount of movement. So we'll take that seam sealer out of there, get that back to bare metal, and apply a stitch weld around the very outer point where it suffers most with flex. So now working on drilling out the spot welds and stop drilling the ends of the cracks. Lots of little cracks coming out of that spot weld there, for instance, 2 little ones out of that spot weld, broken spot weld, and there and there. And then this is our area here where we cut out the crack, because we know we've got a crack, which is that heavy dark line around the mounting stud. And just to prove the theory that it was a crack, we do a straight line cut between 2 points, and we know that, that if the panel falls out or simply comes away like this, then we know that that was a crack line. As you can see, it's a sweeping arc, and we'll do another straight line. We'll do a single cut down this side here to join those 2 8mm spot drills together, and then that panel will fall out, and then that again proves it's a crack. So that not only gets rid of the crack, so it's not a problem in the future, but then when we weld that channel up, we penetrate on the 2mm threaded receiver platform inside, and then join it to this outer rear axle carrier panel skin, and that strengthens the connection point between those 2 pieces of metal, because other than that they're relying on just 5 of these spot welds, which are problematic anyway. So we greatly improve the strength of the 2 pieces, as well as removing the crack risk as well. And we'll do exactly the same on that side, and then we can then start bare metaling before we go to the welding process of plug welding all these holes back up. So all the crack repair work is finished now. That's stop drilled the ends of the cracks. Remember previously in the video we were working on that left front mounting point where we cut out a channel section to prove there was a crack, and we'd also stop drilled the ends of the cracks and drilled out the spot welds that were broken. And now we've carried out the plug weld repairs on those and welded the cracks. We've smoothed those back and then degreased the mounting points. We've bare metaled the mounting points for the 4 areas where we're going to be reinforcing them with our Redish V2 reinforcement plates. Then we've masked up and painted the chassis in that area copper weld through primer. We've also painted the backs of the reinforcement plates with copper weld through primer, so there's never any bare metal going to be put to touching the chassis. And now we've got the bolts back in place to hold the plates in line. We're going to get these plates tacked into position, and then we can start doing the full welding process. We've just welded the front spacer plates on position to the handbrake console. Here's the left rear plate, so there was a crack going through this area here. It's been welded and now ground down, but we've left a little bit of strength to it. We have to grind them enough to get the plates to sit flat, but yet still leave as much as we can, because the more you leave, the stronger the weld is. And there was a small crack just here on this seam, and there's the second plate there for the rear piece. So that's what we're going to do now, start welding the reinforcement plates on. The welding reinforcement plate work is finished now. So that's the Redish V2 reinforcement plates, left front, left rear, right rear. And also the spacer plates here, which are the ones that go on the handbrake console area. And we've also taken care of some corrosion up in the fuel tank area that was just starting to creep in, that the customer asked for, on these fuel tank strap brackets here and here. Also applied some stitch welds on the corners of the rear trailing arm pockets because they were showing some signs of flex. Taken care of some corrosion on the fuel tank strap brackets and the brake pipe brackets on both sides. And also the battery tray area as well that was suffering with corrosion. We've taken that strap off there, that we don't need that bracket. We've also, before we've done, it's now in etch primer as you can see, but before that etch primer was carried out, we've applied the POR 15 metal prep solution, which is a chemical which neutralizes corrosion and coats the chassis or the bare metal areas with a zinc phosphate coat, ready for good adhesion of the next layer, which is this one you're seeing now, which is etch primer. We've also taken care of a spot weld that was broken up in that area there and stitched the rest of that panel on the left rear of the wheel arch lip. And shortly we're going to be going on to the high build primer stage, which will be coated over the underside entirely, and then later on there's be sprayable seam sealer. We've now finished this car's high build primer stage, which is the grey paint. So that's all the way into, well, that's the rear axle carrier panel plus the 4 plated areas that we've carried out work to. The left arch lip up here, which we've worked on, plus the fuel tank area where we've taken out the corrosion on those fuel tank strap brackets, and into the trailing arm pockets over on both sides. And now over in the boot floor section as well. And now we're about to move into the sprayable seam sealer finish. And now the sprayable seam sealer application is finished, and the top coat colouring, which is our standard E-coat replication, which is that olive green sort of finish that we apply to make it look as original as possible. Now that's dried overnight, we're now just assessing it the next morning. Very pleased with the finish and the quality of it. So you've still got that nice rippled textured finish, but also it's not too thick and clumsy, and it's also extremely dry and durable. So there I am rubbing it all over and there's nothing coming off whatsoever. So that is quite unique to us. That's not something that many people opt for. It's because we put so much time and effort into the preparation standards, the degreasing, multiple degrease stages, and then the etch primers, the high build primers, to make sure that our seam sealers absolutely adhere properly but also go everywhere. And we're not just talking about the plated areas or anywhere where we've done corrosion, we're talking the smallest of angles and areas and every side and contour of the pressings of the floor and the shadows and the high areas and the low areas. We make sure we get it everywhere so that we've got complete coverage and protection from the elements. We make sure we get it into the inside cavities of these fuel tank strap brackets, the top sections of the brake pipe brackets, all the way up inside the rear trailing arm pockets. I mean, nobody will ever see up there, you probably wouldn't even get any water up there, but we do every single face of it, all 4 faces, to make sure that we're protected properly. You can see the stitch welds here that we've done previously to hold that rear trailing arm pocket in on both sides, because there was sealer movement on this edge here, and there was corrosion that was starting to attack these brake pipe brackets here. All been taken care of, neutralised with POR 15 metal prep, then had etch primers, high build primers, sprayable seam sealers, and now top coat. And then shortly what we'll be doing as well is cavity waxing, which will be going through all these various holes that we've opened up. We've taken all the grommets out so that we can get our 500mm wands through, so we can start here and we can reach all the way through the middle, spray a cavity wax which does a 360 spray fan pattern as we're drawing it back out of the cavity, and know that we're coating all the back sides of these areas here where there might be a little bit of swarf left, or there might be a burning from the welding process on the inside edge of this rear axle carrier panel. That's just natural when you're doing any sort of works like that, and we make sure that we protect these cars as best as possible. There's the spacer plates, which are on the handbrake console area, just to even out the 2mm additional size from the front pushrod connection. And then going into the fuel tank area as well, we also went a bit further than normal. Traditionally we sort of go up to this halfway through the fuel tank line on the roof section of the fuel tank. This time we went down to the bottom edge of the fuel tank area. This is the start of the leading edge of the floor going forward to the front of the car. They had corrosion seeping in on this sort of edge where the jacking point starts, on that edge there, and also on this V-brace bracket or V-brace connection. So we took care of that and made sure that was done. And also these fuel tank strap brackets were corroding, so they were removed, the corrosion was removed, neutralised, and then the process brought all the way forward to the front edge of the fuel tank area. There's those other stitch welds on that side. Now looking back at the car, we've got the right rear plate, the left rear plate. We also had some internal cracks on this vehicle as well, which were dealt with from underside before the plate went on. We had a spot weld damage here and here with a small crack in it, and those were dealt with before that plate was welded on. Also a spot weld breakage on the other side around about there, which was also done. Another spot weld showing signs of breakage there that was done, and now it's plug welded. You can just see the part of the plug. We also had one spot weld there which was drilled out and plug welded up there, and then we've done a complete weld down that side there. That was showing no signs of separation at all, but that's our sort of trademark. We've sort of developed that process years and years ago, and we do that on every one. So where it was a 2-panel lap joint like that, it is a risky area because it's in the pull line of the rear axle carrier panel mounts, which are always pulling down under torsional load, and we've completely welded that joint together and then re-sealed it so that it's watertight and obviously corrosion protected against corrosion. There was one stud that broke on this fuel tank strap, fuel tank boot floor area here. They have little studs like that, and the corrosion was so tight on the nut that simply snapped off. That can happen regularly, so we do a proper solution for that. Some people will leave it off or put a self-tapper into the body, up into the boot, which is dangerous. We've got a rivet system that we put in place, so it gives us a new thread, and that will get waxed as well before it leaves us, so that we're sure that it's safe for the elements. And then lastly, over on the battery tray area, this was suffering with its typical corrosion on that panel, or that bracket here, that's not needed anymore on the M3 models. So simply we've taken that off, treated the corrosion as part of the whole process, and then carried on that sealer application all the way through the battery tray section, so all the way through to the rear panel as well. So technically the back of the car is completely painted now, and now we're going to go inside and do the internal crack welding work up on the top sections here and here, which are only accessible inside the car. This is the area that loads of people either forget about or just don't even know about, or just ignore it. They don't want to know about it, but we always check these cars with a bore scope camera every single time, and they are suffering with small hairline cracks starting on the MIG welds just here and here. So we're going to go inside the car, protect it, strip it, protect it, and then cut sections open in the rear seat panel. But this being a convertible model, it's got the additional convertible bulkhead, so we're going to have to cut a section out of that first to access the rear seat panel, and then stop drill the cracks, which we'll show you next in the video. Here's some of the parts that are going back on the BMW E46 M3 convertible that we've got in for the rebuild work on the rear axle carrier panel. So majority of these items are genuine BMW. We've just got the Hell braided hoses, which are going on the front to replace the cracked front rubber brake hoses. Those are obviously an aftermarket item, but the rest of them we've got genuine BMW metal brake pipes front to rear, power steering high pressure hose, and the sealing rings. Exhaust rubber mount for the rear, and also the centre section that are broken, rear shock absorber top mounts, plus the bump stops, prop shaft front rubber coupling, the brake pipe clipping points and the spring clips, along with the joiner down there, air conditioning drive belt, differential input seal and lock ring, constant pressure valve for the engine, timing chain tensioner O-ring that's also leaking a little bit of oil, and the prop shaft front rubber coupling. So we can go forward and get all that sort of fitted, and then rebuild the underside of the vehicle. We're now well into the internal front cavity repair. So this is the unique process that needs to be carried out on a convertible. It's a lot different to the coupe ones that we have to deal with, because you have to cover the car and protect. So much comes out of the car, and it's completely protected with fireproof blankets all over the place, cardboard and the carpet, so that we can actually work safely in this area. So we first of all have to cut out a section of the convertible bulkhead, which is this section here. Then we can access the seat panel, which we have to take a section out of, and then we can get to the problematic welds that are here. that had hairline cracks coming out of the end of them. Any cracks coming out were stop drilled, and then the belt sander is used to remove these MIG welds to then replace them with plug weld and new MIG welds, which is what we're going to do in this side. Then we'll put a Redish 005 reinforcement plate over this cavity of the seat panel that we cut out to close the cavity. Then that area will be painted inside. There's a 20mm hole that we'll use for cavity waxing later on, and then the seat panel, the convertible bulkhead panel will be reinstated, which is exactly what we've done over this side. You can see where we've done a cutout all the way along there, and there's our new plate in there with the 20mm hole for cavity waxing later on, and here's the 005 plate that we've got shaped and stitched in place and then re-welded the outer. Some paint on there to help it be protected from the elements, and then later on, once all this is cleaned up and vacuumed out and back to original, then we can put the sound deadening pad back in and then start unmasking everything and then rebuilding the interior. So quite a lot of work inside the car, but it's definitely worth doing because any cracks that are left inside the cavity are at risk of growing. So now that's dealt with, we can move forward. We're finishing this side up and then we'll start with the cavity waxing later on. We've now applied the cavity wax, which is the really important stage to make sure the cavities are protected for years to come, where there might be some swarf. Even though we blow everything out with an airline, you're still going to get little weld burns on the backs of these cavity panels where we've done our welding, so we make sure we heavily cavity wax, even on exhaust brackets up here that could do with some protection. And here it is just dripping out of the front sections. So that's the handbrake console in the front there behind the fuel tank bracket, up into the rear trailing arm section on both sides there. And then we'll go on and do the rear ones shortly. Well, we've cleaned all those off anyway, and we're getting small amounts of dribble coming through. And then we'll also go inside the car and do the tops of the areas where we've done welding work up here underneath the rear seat as well, because we leave a 20mm hole ready for cavity waxing, and then we put a BMW grommet in position to make it look the factory once we finish cavity waxing. We've now finished the rebuild on this BMW E46 M3 convertible, and I'm just going to recap what the car's had. So it's been in for the Redish Motorsport E46 RACP repair and reinforcement process. That take care of the cracks and the spot weld problems that it was suffering with around the mounting points on the left rear, the right rear, the left front and the right front mounts of the rear axle carrier panel. And once those spot welds and cracks were addressed, then we've carried out the reinforcement work using the Redish Motorsport E46 V2 reinforcement plate kit. So that gets you a left rear reinforcement plate, a right rear reinforcement plate, a left front in the distance there, and a right front behind the fuel filler neck system, along with two spacer plates and the 005 plates which are used inside the vehicle. Then we took care of the corrosion, as you saw in the video if you've been watching the entire video. So that corrosion treatment process that the customer specified took us a lot further on this car. It included the trailing arm pockets all inside the fuel tank area, and including the fuel tank strap brackets, which got us to the sort of bulkhead line just here at the sort of where the underside floor section starts, as well as taking care of the fuel tank strap brackets here that were corroded, the brake pipe brackets here, and the same with these two pairs up here, along with some corrosion that was evident on the rear, on the spring perch area just up there, also on spring perch on the left hand side, and as well on the battery box section up here. So what you're seeing here is water spots, because the car's already been out on road test, so it's naturally just picking up road spots already, because there may have been a bit of moisture on the road. But there would have been the typical E46 battery box corrosion trap point there, and on an M3 it's not needed, so we simply remove that, treat the corrosion, and as you may have seen, the corrosion was treated with POR 15 metal prep, which neutralizes that corrosion and coats or protects it with a zinc phosphate coat for the next layer, which is then our well-developed corrosion protection process, which is etch primer, high build primer, sprayable seam sealer, OEM top coat finish in an E-coat colouring that we devised, and then the extensive cavity wax process, which cavity waxes the entire vehicle through all the various grommet holes that you see around here. Also at the front you may still even see some cavity wax in certain places, and that protects the car inside extremely well. And then the reassemble process can start. And at that point, some customers, majority of customers actually, do specify some additional parts, which makes sense because there's a great labour saving. Whilst the axle's out, instead of it being a 4.5 hour job to do subframe bushes on their own, people can just benefit from having 1 hour to do the subframe bushes, for example. So the list of works that this car's had that have been authorised extra were genuine BMW prop shaft front coupling, which is this mount here, because the old one was suffering from cracks. For some reason the camera won't focus, there we go. So new genuine front prop shaft coupling. Genuine BMW exhaust centre nuts and bolts up at this joint here because they were extremely corroded. Exhaust centre section rubber mount, genuine BMW again, and the nut for the top and the bottom. Then we've also done a differential input seal because there was a leak, small leak starting at the diff input seal, so it's had a new seal and a lock ring in there as well. Then front to rear BMW metal brake pipes. Now this is the ultimate in brake pipe. These are done front to rear. We don't tend to join them in. They go all the way to the service joint, which is in the engine bay, and then we shape them. They come completely straight, and we have to shape them and get them to their original finishes. So you just look down that line now, that looks perfect. We take a lot of care and attention when shaping these with the BMW special tools and making sure they look as original as possible. And then you go all the way through the clipping points with all new clips, and then up to the supply the left rear flexi hose, which is this item here, and then over the axle to the factory join up there, and then supply the right rear flexi hose up there as well. They've also got a coating, a very fine film coating of transparent wax over them, so they shouldn't corrode in the future and they'll always come undone. Then the next item is the offside rear silencer rubber mount. So this car's got one of the excellent AC Schnitzer rear silencers, and there was one rubber mount that was broken, so the new one is up there. Genuine BMW again. Then we've supplied and installed genuine BMW rear shock absorber top mount kits, as they were just starting to show signs of separation up there. And also bump stops as well, I should say. The bump stops were crumbling, so it's got new bump stops on the shock absorbers as well. Then we've got the rear silencer exhaust clamp kit. Now these again were cracked because that's quite a common thing on these E46 M3s at this joint here, they get cracked. So this is a kit from X8R, which is a good replacement, seeing as you can't sort the BMW ones because they're put on and then the pipes are flared, so you can never put them on or off. So that solves that problem, and we've coated it with a nickel anti-seize paste so it shouldn't corrode, and it will always come undone if that service joint needs to be opened in the future. Then we've carried out a welding repair to the heat shield up here. There were some studs that were broken up here, so we've welded 4 new studs on, used the BMW Correct anti-vibration washers underneath, then also on top, that's 8 anti-vibration washers, then new washers, and then new nylock nuts, making sure that the poke of the bolt, or the protrusion of the bolt through the nut, is just as original, so it doesn't foul or get in risk of anywhere near that drive shaft just there. And then we moved on to the front of the vehicle. Oh, I should also say, as well as the welding process, we found some flex in the seam sealer around the rear trailing arm pocket. So what we did is took the seam sealer off there, bare metaled it, and then applied some stitch welding around that rear trailing arm pocket to the rear axle carrier panel, because like I say, the sealer was split on both sides, and that just gives us a guarantee that there's more stability in that joint there. It's not just relying on spot welds, it's now got some stitch welds, so it's never likely to progress or move or get any worse. And then underneath, or at the front of the car, I've already removed the under tray just for this video purpose. So we've carried out, first of all, an engine oil service using Castrol Edge 1060 M-Power engine oil. Genuine BMW oil filter kit. I know I can't really show you any of this because it's all fitted already. And obviously the labour to do that, along with a pollen filter as well, or microfilter as BMW call them. Then we've supplied and installed a air conditioning drive belt, because there were cracks in this drive belt, so there's a fresh new drive belt there for the air conditioning system. It's also had a timing chain tensioner sealing ring replaced, because there was a small oil moisture going along the cylinder head that way and also down a little bit. So in the distance, the timing chain tensioner has had a new sealing ring, and the oil leak's been cleaned up as best as what we could get to. And it's also had a CPV, which is the constant pressure valve up there on the side of the engine block. That again was also leaking a little bit of oil down the engine block, and that's been cleaned as well. Then BMW power steering high pressure hose, that's the one that takes the fluid from the pump through the S-pipe restricted with the restrictor in the middle, and then to the power steering rack. That's got new sealing rings both ends and also fresh power steering fluid. And then lastly, underneath the car, the front brake flexible hoses, which were original rubber ones, were suffering with cracks where they've been flexing and articulating at this point here. So we supplied and installed Hell braided hoses in black to try and keep them an original sort of OEM look and finish, but these are metal braided hoses, so they won't break down and won't cause a cracking problem like the rubber ones do. And that completes the work underneath the car. There's one more thing to show you inside the car. What I should also say as well is that we carried out fairly extensive works inside the car, which you probably watched again if you've watched the video all the way through. That was the internal sections of the rear axle carrier panel, the front mounts, which are over here and here. Up in the top sections, where the MIG welds hold those threaded receivers in, they were suffering with very small hairline cracks. So that was the work that required us to go inside the car, and that means hard top off, door cards out, all the boot trims and center console and rear carpet, everything protected extremely well and thoroughly, and then access panels cut open in the rear convertible bulkhead and also in the seat panel, and then stop drill the ends of the cracks, remove the cracked and affected MIG welds, replace them with our own, weld the cracks, and then weld the Redish 005 cover panels back on, and then reinstate and weld the convertible bulkhead cover back on, and then paint the area inside the car. And we also had to do some work on the left rear mount as well. There was some suffering with issues up in that area there, so that had to be opened up and dealt with two spot welds that were broken and a crack that was broken. We had to drill that out and re-weld that before putting the reinforcement plate on. So that is an effective repair underneath the vehicle and internally, a complete rear axle carrier panel overhaul without compromise. And now the car is ready to come off the lift, go on a final road test, and then have its vehicle clean carried out, and a wheel alignment process before we hand over to the customer. And the last item that we did for the customer is a new retrim steering wheel. Well, we didn't do this. This was done by Royal Steering Wheels. They've done a great job making an original steering wheel out of this one. So we've got original BMW leather, which is excellent. Not many people realise that the leather would originally be slightly rippled, well, like what leather is in that certain finish. Whereas lots of cars just have a flat sort of finish because there's so much dirt and grime and handle wheels all over it. It just ends up going shiny over the years. But yeah, that is what original real leather looks like. And we've got the excellent end stitching as well, which is fantastic colouring, really prominent against the black leather, and just makes it a really nice place to be. So I'm sure the customer's going to enjoy that on the drive home and then for future years to come. And that's the end of our work now with this E46 M3 convertible. 55,000 miles, SMG transmission, 2005. It's been in for the Redish Motorsport rear axle carrier panel repair and reinforcement process, plus all the other work that you've just seen and watched in this video. We've carried out a 12-mile road test, also carried out the digital wheel alignment with a printed report, and now the car has also been cleaned internally and externally with safe wash techniques by our detailer. And the car is ready to hand over to the customer.